May I invite Shrimati Vasundhara Raje, Hardeep Singh Puri, Amitabh Kant, Navtej Sarna, and TCA Raghavan on stage.
Lovely to see you, ma'am. Wonderful to see you.
May I now invite Shrimati Vasundhara Raje ji and Hardeep Singh Puri to launch the book here on stage. Are being taken, I'll tell you a little bit about the books. Many democratically elected leaders of the 21st century have displayed streaks of recklessness, megalomania, bizarre of self-obsession, and political views that are difficult to characterize. This book studies actions of these contemporary political leaders and covers Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, the rise of Bharatiya Janata Party under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and decision-making in respect of global governance, terrorism, and trade. It brings to light the fact that at the heart of delusional politics is perhaps the delusional politician. Delusional politician. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is the book, which of course you have just seen being launched, and
You have a mic there, ma'am?
Yeah. So sorry I'm barging in on this, Mr. Raghavan, Mr. Navtej ji and Amitabh ji, and the man of the moment, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. I've broken into this for a minute because I wanted to tell you all that I've been privileged to know Mr. Puri for a long, long time. I happened to be in the MEA myself for a little while. And while I was there, I had the privilege of working with him and many talented others, some of whom are on the stage today, and some of whom are sitting in the front row here. So I wanted to say that he is a man who wears many, many hats. A teacher, a diplomat, and a very good one, and finally a politician. And we're looking forward to seeing this movement from teacher, diplomat to politician. By the way, all of this makes a difference to that politician. And I believe that he's been an exceedingly good teacher, I'm told. I know that he's been a great diplomat, so I'm sure that in his new role as the Minister of UDH of this country, where he's already done a spectacular job, he will continue to work and do a stellar job for the country. So today I'd just like to congratulate him. His second book, I'm sure it's going to be a great success. And all of us are not going to just enjoy reading it, but I'm sure lots and lots of you are going to go out and buy it. So all the very best, and to you, Hardeep, the very, very best, because I'm sure this is going to be a great book.
Thank you for that introduction, ma'am. May I just say what a great privilege it is for me personally, and I know for my colleagues here too, to be on this dais with you. And as you said, we recall with great warmth the time you spent in the Ministry of External Affairs and the leadership you provided to all of us, and the great efforts you made to remain in touch with us, even after you left the Ministry of External Affairs. I remember I was posted in Pakistan, and at one stage, I was really surprised to find a card which you had sent, and I don't know through how many channels it had come, but I was very touched. So thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you for recalling that wonderful period in the Ministry of External Affairs. So Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri's book, he is of course teacher, diplomat, and now politician, but we also have an unusual, another unusual attribute, which is a serving minister who is writing books on serious subjects. This is a serious book, and it shows, I think, Mr. Puri's intention to engage at an intellectually high level on a central issue confronting not just us in India, but an issue which is certainly there in many countries around the world, which is the delusional politics and the politics of delusion. So the book is about the United States, it's about the United Kingdom, it's about India, but it also covers a very large canvas, because he's talking about what are the structural factors which explain errors of judgment. He's trying to go beyond the tactical reasons as to why mistakes are made, and he identifies that as a particular mindset which becomes susceptible to what he calls delusional politics. So I'll begin by asking Mr. Puri to talk to us a little bit about this and also explain why delusional politics is something more than the normal delusion which comes into all governments after a certain period of time. Is there something more to it than just the distance which comes between government and day-to-day realities?
Before I do that, Raghavan, let me first, right at the outset, not only second, but warmly endorse the sentiment that you expressed about our favorite minister. I think we retained, if I may be allowed to say, a claim to her affection well after she was Minister of State in External Affairs and went on to be a very popular and a very successful Chief Minister. So as far as I'm concerned, it is a particular privilege that this book is being launched by you, Madam.
I couldn't have said no to you.
No, thank you very much. And but you know, it's also at a personal level a great privilege and an honor. So thank you very much for being here. And you know that I would spend many more minutes, not minutes. I could go on to express the kind of sentiment that Amitabh and Navtej and Raghavan and I share. But since we are short of time, I'm going to reserve that for a separate. Maybe I'll go on social media to express myself on that. Raghavan, there is not a very big difference, but a difference of nuance. Normal people entrusted with the responsibility of decision-making in their day-to-day lives tend to display what you term as the delusion of politics. But here I'm going a step further. I'm referring to those people who during the course of their tenures or their reigns, etc., have taken decisions which have had the effect of unraveling countries. Brexit is a case in point, because a referendum which was not required in terms of the Constitution, it was a decision taken at the spur of the moment, having a pizzeria in Chicago's O'Hare Airport, because the person concerned was facing heat from the Eurosceptics in his party, decided to smoke them out and said, let's have a referendum. Well, he took that decision, lost control of the process, took the eye off the ball, and lo and behold, it was going to be a close call either case. But that one decision has had the effect of unraveling an important country. And what I say in the book is that the most obvious thing that should have been done after you knew that a referendum had gone wrong, that the external environment had changed. This was no longer a Brexit anchored in a transatlantic alliance when you had an Obama kind of presidency. You had, meanwhile, the election of the 45th President of the United States and a completely new dynamic. The most obvious thing would have been that you decide to undo that and restore the status quo ante. Now, I saw a report yesterday that a pizzeria, and it's interesting, it's another pizzeria, it's offering a 20% discount on anyone who is willing to put in a vote that let's go back to the pre-Brexit poll. In other words, have another poll to undo this. But that's not in the realm, because one delusional politician is followed by another delusional politician, and they have something that is motivating them, things are going wrong. So this is slightly different from the normal kind of delusion and politics which most people practice on a daily basis. This is about altering the course of history to your own disadvantage through decisions consciously taken. And I have Hitler going into the cold of the Russian winter. 100 years earlier, Napoleon had done the same thing. So the remarkable thing is that people continue to do these things when they know that those decisions are wrong.
Well, how would you, in this spectrum, where would you place Prime Minister Blair, for instance, with his decision on Iraq? Was it as delusional as Brexit or less so?
Well, you know, both of them are based on false narratives. The decision to use force in the case of Iraq was based on the narrative that there were weapons of mass destruction. They came to the Security Council. They were not able to convince an entirely skeptical council. So they decided, because there were weapons of mass destruction, to go in and bomb the hell out of the place. Well, the first Iraq process was wrong. The second one was equally wrong. But did we learn? No, we did the same thing in Libya. Libya with Security Council authorization. And then when the Security Council should have stepped in the case of Syria, you had double vetoes. So you have delusional decision-making at the highest levels of global governance taking place in spite of the fact that, you know it's wrong. You use force. I think the then Prime Minister had a very nice statement in his formulation in his statement to the UNGA. You know, I must tell you an interesting story. Manjeev, who was my deputy, we had taken a very tough stand against the use of force. So I kept telling him, are you sure that we've got the backing of Delhi? Because, you know, as an ambassador, very often you skate on very thin ice. So he said, we'll find out when the PM speaks. So there was a line in his speech which said, we do not accept the reordering of society by the use of force from outside. When he showed me that line, I said, bingo, 100% we are on the right track.
But just to push this a little forward, why do you say that President Trump in the United States is an example of delusional politics? Because if you see it in the context of President Bush and President Obama, President Bush in Iraq, President Obama in Libya, what is so exceptional about Trump?
Well, there are two remarkable things about President Trump. One, I don't think that he is the cause of what is happening. He is the symptom of the angst which is there in society. You know, everyone else is living the American dream. You know, your children, the children of other immigrants, they are highly successful, entrepreneurs. They've done well in Wall Street, etc. But the white American, those belonging to the working class, especially in the Rust Belt, they found their incomes over their lifetimes declining. No, Trump has played into that narrative. Trump has gone in there and said, all this is due to immigrants and international trade. I think he's wrong, but that's my view. But he has used that narrative to resonate amongst those people, and lo and behold, he won the election against 16 other candidates from his own party who I think were better qualified in terms of governance experience. But that's not, it doesn't end there. Trump is, that is an administration in trouble. He's not going to be impeached. I say that in my book. I rule that out. But he will be indicted for acts of omission and commission prior to becoming president. He's definitely going to be indicted for obstruction of justice. And I go to the extent of saying that if the support base amongst his voters doesn't decline, it hasn't declined, don't be surprised if he wins another term.
Well, we have with us Mr. Navteej Sarna, till recently ambassador in the US, India's ambassador to the US, and I'm sure he's not entirely tired about talking about President Trump. So do you think, Navtej, that there is something called Trumpism, which is going to be a permanent feature, regardless of whether President Trump gets re-elected or not, or whatever his future may be?
Thank you very much, Raghavan, and may I say that it's a privilege to be asked to participate in this panel under the chairmanship of former MOS EA, with whom I had a very, very dramatic visit to Cartagena just after our nuclear tests. But with all due respect to the two senior members of the leadership here, I think the only conclusion I can draw in a Trumpian world is that politicians should be not allowed near pizza. Yes, I have been in Washington for the last 2 years and 2 months. I arrived about 48 hours before President Trump, so I saw it right from the beginning. But I must add, I think the Ministry of External Affairs, in its own delusion, had sent me off to London before that. And as soon as I finished doing Brexit, they said, "You've done enough damage, now go to Washington." So I was sent off there to welcome Mr. Trump. So in some ways, I feel part of this large delusion. I think you're absolutely right in highlighting this aspect of Trumpism. And Mr. Puri also mentioned that, Trump is not the cause. The only difference, I would say, is you compared him to Blair, Obama, and others, is the way that Trump does things highlights or heightens the sense of delusion. Because he makes it sound that it all just happened when he was watching 3 television screens simultaneously and eating his cheeseburger in the evening, and he decided to tweet something. And every morning the tweets come at about 5:30 in the morning. So about 6 tweets at 5:30 in the morning, all of us used to get. So I think this is that sense of his personality which has impacted this entire process. But I think there is a dimension beyond delusion. There's a dimension beyond people behaving, whether Cameron did what he did and then ran away, or whether Trump is doing the way things he's doing, walking out of Paris, walking out of TPP, and so on and so forth. I think there is an underlying reality, which is not delusion. That is a dissatisfaction, a deep alienation with the so-called international liberal order that has prevailed post-World War II. Whether you think of it in terms of globalization of trade, globalization of services, the entire weakening of the nation state, it has disenfranchised and weakened certain very important lobbies who feel alienated. And these are the people who are now hitting back. I mean, the issue of the Polish plumbers in the United Kingdom has become symptomatic of this. I mean, my favorite Brexit story, and I'll stop with that, is that just before Brexit, on television in London, they were interviewing people in inner UK and asking, do you think we should have Brexit? And this gentleman said, yes, we must have Brexit. And I won't name the country, but I will say that he was a brown-skinned gentleman from the general area that we all live in. And he said, yes, we must have Brexit, otherwise all these immigrants come in here. So I did a double take on that, but that's how people feel. So there is that underlying process, which I think if Trump goes for another 4 years, you'll certainly see a strengthening. If he doesn't go, it'll take some reversal by the next administration to push it back.
Well, the book is about delusional politics, and there are 3 case studies, the United States, UK, and India. But Mr. Puri, if I may ask, I know you talk about democracies and delusional politics, and therefore, while China figures in the book, do you feel that the Chinese leadership is less susceptible to the politics of delusion than democracies, or do you feel that China deserved a separate book, so you would attend to that later?
Well, let me be careful. I don't want to convey the impression that it's only democracies and democratically elected leaders who are delusional. It's just that I have not studied China. And I have absolutely no doubt, if you were to ask me for an opinion, and this is a personal opinion which has nothing to do with who I am or the fact that I'm a member of the Council of Ministers, you know, big countries which rise quickly, which spread, they can be very delusional. And I see some attributes in the Chinese behavior on the international stage, questioning the international order, anchored in the rule of law, not accepting the findings of a tribunal in the South China Seas, imposing one belt, one road, etc. I personally see a delusional streak in that, because if you are not able to realistically implement something and you're going to invite a backlash through, you know, creating debt in countries, for those countries to have to sell their territory and their sovereignty in the process, yes, it's delusional. But here I've studied only 3 democracies with which I'm reasonably familiar. I've served in the UK, in the United States, and I was born here, and this is the evolving story. But you're right. I think at the end of the day, China deserves a fuller treatment, and it should come from those who have a more intimate knowledge of that decision-making process. Because that decision-making process is much less transparent than the kind that the democracies show.
Well, we also have with us Mr. Amitabh Kant. He's CEO of Niti Aayog. But more than that, for many years, he has, for many of us who have served outside the country, been really the poster boy for talking about the India growth story and the India infrastructure story. So when we talk about China and India, do you think the gap is going to reduce, or is it going to increase in the next 20 years in terms of growth, infrastructure, development, etc.?
So Raghavan, let me first say that it's a great privilege and an honor to be a part of this unique panel. Particularly, many of you from the Foreign Service suffer from this delusion that Madam was a great foreign minister. But let me tell you, she was a brilliant Minister for Personnel. And she really took care of all the IAS types rather than the Foreign Service types. You know, the Foreign Service guys just write books, they don't deliver. IAS guys all deliver, ma'am. Yeah. So, ma'am, Raghavan, to your question, it was really a great honor to have you as our minister for such a long time. It was extremely inspirational. But on this question about China and India, there's a lovely chapter in this book on trade, on global trade. And you know, the important thing to understand really, to my view, is that many countries, whether it was Japan, whether it was Korea, whether it was China, all of them have become rich on the back of global trade. And all of them have become rich on the back of American market. And it's important to understand this because India can never make it big without becoming a great exporting nation and without penetrating American market. And that's been my belief. And that's my belief, which will remain for a long time, that India must manufacture to global size and scale. That'll create jobs. We must have coastal economic zones, and we must produce and penetrate American market. That's a must for India. Irrespective of that, my belief is that China's economy is going to slow down, and China's economy is going to come down to about less than 5% in the coming years, whereas the Indian economy will accelerate in the years to come. While we are growing at 7.5%, the big opportunity for India is really to grow at 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, for 3 decades or more, to be able to lift a very, very young population above poverty line. Our average age is 29. China's average age is going to be in 2022. China's average age will be about 42. And rarely has a country not created wealth when it has such light dependency burden. So this is truly India's opportunity. And now that structural reforms, major structural reforms, like goods and services tax across the economy, the insolvency and bankruptcy code, RERA, and I think the big push towards greater efficiency in the economy has been carried out. India's economy, to my mind, in the next 10 years, starting now, next 10 years, will accelerate further, 9 to 10%. You know, with strong political leadership, we should be growing at 9 to 10%. We should be creating many more jobs. And I think, to my mind, India will grow at those rates. We have grown at those rates earlier, but for a relatively short period of 4 to 5 years. The challenge is, how do we make India grow for a long period of time, 3 decades? And this would require, to my mind, 10 to 12 champion states in India. You need 12 champion states who are growing. Today, you have only 2 or 3 champion states who are growing at 12% plus. If 10 states of India grow at 12% plus, India will grow at those. And therefore, you need big drivers of big catalysts of change in the states, particularly in the eastern part of India. UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Haryana, all these have the huge opportunity of growing at 12% plus. And if they grow at those rates, there's no reason why India will not accelerate its growth further to 9 to 10%.
Well, Mr. Puri has a large chapter on India and India's growth story. He also has a chapter on counterterrorism. But I just want to, and this is something which I've often thought about, that are we deluding by ourselves if we focus too much on the geopolitical and the economic? Because when we are looking at our growth story and talking about India and China, what about our social indicators in terms of illiteracy, in terms of death rates?
Well, let me first respond briefly to what Amitabh is saying. It's not surprising. I agree with whatever he says. Look, the United States is an $18 trillion economy today. So if you think you can grow without penetrating that market, you're under some delusion. I agree with him. China is about an $11 trillion economy. We are hoping to be a $10 trillion economy by the time we reach 2030. By that time, the United States would have grown. But the important thing today is that the United States seems to be in retreat from its international obligation. I mean, it has withdrawn from the climate thing. It's almost stalled the dispute settlement, the apex, what is it called, the higher dispute settlement body in the WTO. It is taking other steps which show that it is retreating from the multilateral system. Now, I don't think it is possible for us, and this is where an inward-looking bureaucracy comes in, mostly run by the IAS and my friend Amitabh. You cannot grow unless you participate in plurilateral and multilateral systems. You know, if you're growing at 8, 9, 10%, which I think we should grow, you're not going to be able to do it unless you participate in RCEP. Now I'm speaking in my personal capacity. But we have this great paranoia that, you know, we want to be able to export, but not to be able to import. But when you're growing at 9, 10%, you need to import more industrial intermediates and so on and so forth. I agree with you. You come back, ultimately, the test of good governance are the domestic indices. And I completely agree with you. Poverty is on the decline. I mean, I'm not making this statement on the basis of being a member of the Council of Ministers. If you read the Times of India last 2 pages, if by 2030 you will have less than 3 million people living in abject poverty. There is employment being generated, but we just don't have the capacity so far of being able to measure it. I mean, in my own portfolio, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we normally say that if you spend 100,000 rupees, you create 2.5 jobs. According to that, under the housing projects, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we should have produced 6.8 crore jobs, etc. So, I completely agree with you. The fascination for geopolitical cannot be lost sight of. You can't not focus on that. But your primary thing has to be building toilets, taking electricity to the farthest village, the kind of work that Rajasthan has done, what other states are doing. But I think Amitabh talked about 12 champion states, but he's done something more. He's got 115 aspirational districts, because what the Prime Minister keeps saying all the time, and I think absolutely correctly, that if those 115 districts start performing, then those states will perform in any case. And I think those are the issues that we need to be focusing on. But you know, if I had been a member of the IAS, I'd be writing that. But I spent 40 years in the Foreign Service, so forgive me if I also study UK and US in the process.
Thank you. Naftesh, just to I think you're the most recently returned from outside to India. How much of the Indian growth story is accepted outside? Do they see India changing? Do they see India less deluded?
No, you've asked me 2 different questions. I'm going to answer the first one. I think the important thing is that when you interact with different constituencies, say in the United States, you talk to the media, you talk to the administration, you talk to the Congress, and you talk to the industry. I think the industry has the most positive feeling about India. In other words, they are convinced that India is a good growth story, that India is going to continue to grow, that India is not only a great market, but a good partner. So that's where you get the best feel. I mean, the media will, of course, pick up various things. They'll pick up, but this is going wrong and that is going wrong. The Congress, very often, the congressman depends on who's funding him. So if he's, if he's got too many other people who are acting against our interest in his constituency, then he will speak. But the industry is almost uniform, which in fact has been our greatest strength abroad. And I think both my experience in London and in Washington, D.C. bears this out. For instance, the masala bonds launching in the city of London, which I think I was part of the first 2 or 3 that were launched, they give you a very, very positive feeling. So the India growth story, thanks to what Amitabh and his colleagues have been doing, I think is going very, very well.
Well, very briefly, because I want to leave some time for questions. I don't think you've answered that question, Mr. Puri, but how do we as a democracy make ourselves less vulnerable to being delusional?
Well, first of all, there are parts of us in terms of constituents who, because of narrowly conceived and parochial purposes, are working overtime to undermine our democracy. Look, the honest God's truth is that after 190 years of colonialism, you came down from a contribution to global GDP, which in 1750 was about 27%. I'm quoting Angus Madison, the Cambridge economist. And you came down at the time of 1950 to about 3% or so. Today, you're 13% of your global GDP. Now, somebody has to deliver those goods and services. Because the state in India has been traditionally weak, you turn to organized religion. Organized religion also failed you. Then those Babas took over. Dera something, Sacha something. And these are con jobs. Now, instead of confining yourself to Deras or organized religion, the state has to assume that. Now, if you go on questioning the state, if you go on questioning the instruments of democracy, like getting involved in some con event in London, and it turned out, there's a masked guy behind, Skype, yeah? Something who's lecturing you on how your EVMs can be hacked. I mean, this is asinine. The more I look at it, there are guys who are beneficiaries of democracy, who've been in power for the 43 of the 70 years of our democratic existence. And these are the guys undermining the democratic institution. I mean, you can disagree with others, but you cannot ask for the dismemberment of the state. Or if somebody is asking for the dismemberment of the state, you cannot acquiesce in that process. So I'm saying the fault lies within us. But in spite of these crackpots, we are the world's largest democracy. Because we are a democracy, we slow down in terms of our ability to acquire land and do things at the pace at which the Chinese do things. But we're a great country. And that greatness stems from the fact that democracy provides the platform within which you reconcile differences.
Well, we have a few minutes left, and we'll be happy to take some questions. Please make your questions very brief, and introduce yourself. Yes, sir.
My name is Ram Pratap Singh. As a layman, we've been talking about the state. Now, in India, the state is what drives all the development, all the industries and things like that. Unfortunately, I've noticed a trend in the last 20 years. What one government does, and when the party and the government changes, the other government starts undoing. And that, it's just incredible, because it sets back all the hard work. And, Vasundhara ji is sitting right next to you. And, what happened in Rajasthan is an absolute example. So how does a common man deal with something like that?
First of all, let me start by paying a compliment to the common man. I don't use the word Aam Aadmi, that has a political connotation where I live in Delhi, and those guys are different. But first of all, thank you for providing a venue for this very intellectually stimulating annual literary festival. I've been coming here, I came here when my first book was released, so let me compliment you on that. I completely agree with you. That's why when Pradhan Mantri Shri Narendra Modi ji got elected with an absolute majority in 2014, you know, things which were put in place by the previous government, they continued. We accepted Aadhaar, we accepted other things, we tried to implement GST. So there is a popular perception that when governments change, I totally agree with the Rajasthani case, I think governments are best advised to build on the positives constructed by the previous government and to give it further impetus. Because at the end of the day, the elected government is going to be tested and will have to respond to the demands of the electorate, which will demand goods and services and at a higher aspirational level. So I totally agree with you. I think where people do that change course, they are inviting trouble.
No, I just wanted to give you my own example. I was Secretary Tourism with a Marxist government in Kerala when we launched God's Own Country campaign. And Kerala went on, you know, simply because the Congress government came in and accepted the God's Own Country campaign. And subsequent governments all accepted God's Own Country campaign. That led to Kerala emerging as the tourism destination for India, as a great destination. And therefore, you know, I mean, one of the great things, she'd done a brilliant tourism campaign. And this needs to be sustained so that Rajasthan becomes the greatest destination.
I've got to say here that I agree with you. You know, we just have to stop. Stop looking back, stop changing, stop believing that to make every government successful, we have to first undo what the other government did.
And rediscover the wheel.
And then rediscover the wheel. It's absolutely unnecessary. And it doesn't take away from the fact that you might be a good government. If you're able to pick up what was given to you and make it, I mean, take it to another level, I think that makes a lot of difference to people's lives. You talked about tourism just now. I'm talking about tourism. We moved from palaces and forts. That is our strength, we know it. But we moved because it's the new world, and we are connecting with young people. We moved from that to Jaane Kya Mil Jaya, Jaane Kya Dikh Jaya. It's a wonderful, new, thought out idea for a campaign. Brilliant campaign. And we discover that you come back and you immediately reverse it to Padharo Mare Des. Now, Padharo Mare Des is part of our culture. It's part of our bloodstream. It doesn't go away. We have to add to it. You cannot live off just that one forever. And that's just one example. So I'm saying, where you come, Hardeep, where you talked about Swachh Bharat, where you are looking after Pradhan Mantri Awas, I mean, we cannot go back to Indira Gandhi Awas scheme or whatever it was called because of the kind of problems that were embedded within it. This government has taken care to remove those problems, to try and take it again, as I said, to another level.
And both the expenditure and the scale
Yes.
of what we inherited and what we've done, our urban expenditure has gone up 6 times. 6 times in 4.5 years, in what they did in 10 years. But I'm not trying to criticize that. All I'm saying is we built on that. We didn't give up the Awas Yojana. We've expanded it. We are giving the land, we're giving subsidies, so that now you have rural housing, forget rural housing, urban housing. We've already sanctioned 7 million. We have a total demand is 10 million, and we are sanctioning at the rate of 500,000 a month.
So 3 years, you've done in Rajasthan alone 12 lakh houses, which is something amazing.
Yeah.
We'll take a question at the back there. Yes, yes.
That's compliments to you and your ministry and to the process.
Thank you, sir. My name is Vishwas Agarwal, and I'm a marketing student. I studied marketing. So this festival was marketed to me. That is why I'm here. So my question to you is, the way political campaigns are being marketed in today's time, will it not lead to us being more delusional? Because the way Trump's campaign was run, it was a pure game of sheer marketing, how they build into people's minds what the delusion was.
Okay, thank
You know, I have 3 chapters in the book, the original one, which define the attributes of the post-truth era we are in. You know, the Oxford Dictionary, I think in 2016, defined in the term of the year was post-truth, which means you sweeten the truth, you massage it, but that's the reality. There are people doing it, so that's a new norm. We have to learn to deal with it.
Yes, the lady there. A last question. We just have 1 minute left. Yes, madam. Take the mic.
Hello. I want to ask, ma'am, about the hate politics sponsored by the state.
Let me make one thing very clear. There is no hate politics that could ever be sponsored by any right-thinking state. And let me tell you that it never was. And if there was anything that happened, it was truly and only criminal and was dealt with it in that manner.
Acts of criminality. Let me add to what Vasundhara has said. Let me tell you, let's not be vulnerable to false narratives that have been put out. I mean, whether you look at communal riots, etc., look at the record of the government. Not a single communal riot during the time when we've been in government, as against a litany of lies that are fed. And so look at the facts. If a certain act takes place and is an act of criminality, it deserves to be pursued and people need to be punished accordingly. The state is above that. State has a moral duty and the state should bring those people to justice, which is what is being done.
I think we are out of time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your presence
Well,
here
let me first of all thank you once again, Vasundhara, and let me also thank these 3 very distinguished panelists. I don't think any author can hope to do this well. Doing better doesn't arise. But thank you, guys. Thank you very much.